Okay, in this demo we're going to show you how you can use bakery tools to set up a process manager. So what we've done here is to set up a hypothetical pipeline for the rendering and compositing of an animated sequence. Now you can see it's a network where each node in the network represents some process in the pipeline. Now each process is defined by a little text file in the bakery's MUD file format. And the file defines for each process the inputs and the outputs of the process, any parameters which will be exposed to the user, and what the process actually does using the bakery's scripting language. So what we're going to do is to go through each of the processes defined in this pipeline to see exactly what they do. So the first process on the far left here is a simple background image process. It's just an image process which loads an image file. So it has a single attribute which allows the user to pick the image file. And what it does when we double click on it is to display that image. Very simple. So that's our background image. Next over here we've got a series of Relight processes. That is, each of these processes either reads a predefined MUD file, a Relight scene, or generates one. So here we have one which reads a scene containing a mammoth. We have a couple Relight nodes which generate predefined lighting rigs. See, this is a 3-point lighting rig with key, film, and rim lights. And there are two of those, one for midday, and then we have a second one there for sunset. We have a ground scene, which is just a simple scene with our ground. Another little scene with a baker octopus in it. Okay, and now we have up here a couple of scenes which are generated dynamically. This one is going to generate a dome which can be used for environment mapping. It's going to take the background image which we selected in the first process, map it onto this dome, create materials which we can use in our scene, and if we double click on that, it'll open Relight with this dynamically generated scene containing the dome, and we specified the size of the dome as well for doing environment mapping. And this one, turntable, generates a simple camera animation, a turntable animation. We specify, or the user specifies rather, the length of the animation. So if we open that in Relight, we can see it's just a simple animation of a camera. This instancer node is going to take two input scenes, and it's going to generate lots of instances of one over the surface of another. So what we're going to do is use the ground scene as the underlying geometry, and the mammoth is the instance geometry, and you can see that dynamically it's going to generate a scene with lots of mammoths, and we can specify with this attribute the density of the population on the ground. We can change the input from the mammoth to this octopus, generate the scene again, and you can see we have the same scene but with octopi instead of mammoths. So we'll put back the mammoth. So next, this is another Relight node which is simply going to concatenate a certain number of other Relight scenes into one single Relight scene. So it's going to take the environment map, the turntable animation, all those instances, and put those all into a single scene. So we double click on that, and you can see we have the mammoths distributed over the ground geometry. We have our 3-point lighting rig, and we have the camera, the turntable animation. So if we go back into the earlier in the pipeline, we replace the mammoth again with that baker octopus, regenerate that scene, and you can see it's just the same, but instead of mammoths we have octopi. Right. Next step in the pipeline is surfacing. So what this is going to do is it's going to take that input scene, it's going to add a certain number of layers, viz groups in Relight terms, for the background, for the foreground, for the ambient occlusion, etc. It's going to generate a certain number of materials and apply them to the input scenes. So here we double click on that, and you can see we have a viz group for the background, the environment map, another one for the characters, another one for the ground, one for the ambient occlusion, and all, where we see everything in the scene. So now what we're going to do is we're going to render that image, and you'll see it's going to use that predefined lighting rig, which we used earlier, the 3-point lighting rig. And there you go. Now what we can do is we can go back earlier in the pipeline. We can replace that that lighting rig with another one, the one for sunset. Then move forward again, regenerate that scene dynamically, load it into Relight. And if we render again, we'll have exactly the same scene with the turntable animation, the mammoths, etc., but with a different lighting configuration. So it's going to compute the shadow maps, rasterize, and shade. And there you have the same scene, but with different lighting. All right, next step in the pipeline is we define several different rendering layers. That is, in Relight terms, each layer is defined by a single viz group, which is going to be rendered separately, and which we will composite rather later. So this is the little text file which defines each of those nodes. So we have one for the ground, one for the characters, and one for the ambient occlusion paths. And you can see that next to each of those nodes is a little helper node. When we double click on that, it's just going to display the image for us. So this is the image which was computed previously for the ambient occlusion. So if we double click on one of those, you can see it's going to do a batch rendering of that viz group, in this case the ground viz group. Okay, that's done. And now if we double click on the little helper node, it will display the image for us. And there it is. So this is the image which was generated previously for the foreground characters. Okay, so now suppose we have our 3 layers which have been rendered. The next step is to composite them. So here we have a comp node, which is going to load into comp, the comp application, a previously defined compositing tree, which is going to composite the foreground over the background, apply ambient occlusion, add a background image, a little bit of blur, and that is our final image. Now to put that all together, we define this batch node. All it's going to do is it's going to launch each of those renderers as a pre-process, and once they're done, it's going to apply the compositing to the rendered images. So we'll double click on that. See what it's going to do is it's going to launch each of those rendering passes, and when they're done, it's going to composite them together. Okay, there you go. And we double click on this little helper node which displays the final image. Okay, so and one other little helper node which just allows us to delete any previously computed images if we want to start over. So that's the way we compute a single image. Our missing now is a little loop node which allows us to compute the entire sequence from start frame to end frame, and that little helper node above it to display the final sequence.